So today I'm going to be sharing about what we call in some groups, living an honest, life, living a good, honest life. So mostly I focus on the Jewish teachings of what is goodness, what is honest, and who's living, and what is life. But today I'm gonna kind of veer off a little. In Buddhism, which in the areas which do not conflict with Jewish teachings, which have nothing to do with religion or godliness, there's the idea of oneness, and it's called the right way. It's called the righteous way. In Hebrew, the word is tzedek. A tzaddik is considered someone who's really righteous. So there's this noble path that's called, or the righteous path, which has 8 folds or 8 dimensions to be spoken of here. And in Hebrew, we say halacha or derech, which means path. So halacha is the rules of how to go on your journey, how to live the right way. So some of the teachings of Buddhism not only do not conflict with Judaism, but support someone who's trying to live a righteous Jewish lifestyle. So I'm going to share a few different teachings. These are like the basic teachings of the man who was called the Buddha. What he was hoping was that everybody would arrive together into righteousness, into that oneness. So he says there's right view, right intention, right speech. All these words have Hebrew words also. Like the right view is related to sight, to see things as they appear. There's intention, which we would call focus, which is kavana. We have mindfulness, or which could be called hisbonenus or hispodenus. Intention. Intention is ratzon, the will. And there's right speech. There's many words for speech. There's amar, dibar, and then action, which is maisa, livelihood, which is parnasa, or the way that we earn money, effort, which is avoda, the work, and concentration, which is kavana, like I said. So ra'ah is to see, by the way. I don't think I said in Hebrew. And there's 6 wholesome and unwholesome roots of mind. And we would call this wholesome and unwholesome, we'd call it the will, right? In Judaism, we say the Yetzer Hara, the good will, the bad, the will towards bad, and the Yetzer Tov, which is the will toward good. And the mind is always under the influence of one of these states, and that's why we don't want to work only with our mind. That's when we come in to which direction is our mind going. So there's generosity, love, and wisdom, or hatred, greed, and delusion. And this is basically to summarize all the states of which direction are we going. If we're going towards generosity or greed, are we going towards love or hatred, wisdom or delusion? Wisdom is often requires a lot of courage to see the truth versus to delude ourselves. And he says there's 3 kinds of suffering: pain, conditionality, and change. Pain being it hurts. Change means I'm not prepared, I'm out of control, and conditionality means it ends. It's not enough, right? Or there's enough, but it ends at some point, and I don't want it to end. And he says there's 8 vicissitudes that we will experience throughout life, no matter what our actions or intentions are. In other words, 4 spectrums or oscillations. So, or somewhere between this, we find ourselves between pleasure and pain. And this is, in Jewish, we say, oneg is the pleasure, and noga is like the ailment, almost like, say, the chola. Gain and loss, this is clear. The idea in Judaism is, are you being blessed with the flow, or is it like the faucet closed? Praise and blame, in other words, honor or ill repute. Fame. Praise and blame. Would say more like. I want to move to the next one for a second. I'll come back. The one I was mentioning was fame and disrepute, ill repute. This is in Hebrew we call it kavod, you want kavod, or the opposite, right? We're shiftless, like lowless. Sometimes if we stay low, we get kavod. There's some of these unpredictable sort of paths. And then praise and blame. We're either somewhere between getting praise and somewhere towards getting blamed. A unique Jewish feature is that we praise God, and yet we do we have anava, we have humility to work on ourselves. There's 4 noble truths. The first and fundamental teaching about the nature of our experience and spiritual potential is that the existence of suffering. We have the creation story with Judaism in the Torah, which tells us about how suffering was brought into the world by the sin of eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And these 4 noble truths is kind of could be used for that. The existence of suffering, it exists. The origin of suffering, where does it come from? In what way am I eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which brings death into the world? 1 second, just gotta plug in my phone. Then we have the cessation of suffering, that it's possible to end it, and the path for the cessation of suffering. This is like a story from Rabbi Zisha of Anipoli. There was a man struggling. It was one of Hasidim of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidus. The man was suffering, and he said, I just can't bear it anymore. He said, go to Rabbi Zisha of Anipoli. He'll help you. He gets there, sees a man living in poverty. He sees that his life is a daily struggle. He says, I'm almost sorry to say this, but I was sent to you to teach me how to live in such kind of suffering. He said, oh no, he made a mistake. I have only had blessings in my life. I cannot help you with suffering. So we see this about a view. It's about intention, focus, his actions, and really this idea that we don't have to keep suffering. Can we say it's our attitude? Each one has to do the self-inquiry, the self-accounting. There's 5 precepts. Or not 5 precepts, 5 things to refrain from, really. Refrain from these is the foundational standards of conduct for an ethical life. We call this in Judaism, it's related to a chesron, like we have a deficit, and in some way, like we may, how do I say this in other words? We may think that by giving it what it wants, it'll be satisfied, but actually it's the opposite. It grows. It's like this appetite. Like in Proverbs, King Shlomo says, you have $1, you want 2. You have 100, you want 200, and so on. So we have a code by the 10 commandments of what we're not allowed to do. Here there's just 5, but they could relate. These are more relating to certain kinds of suffering. Killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. We call it in Hebrew lashon hara, where here it's called false, harsh, or idle speech, basically evil tongue, and intoxicants that cloud the mind. So the idea was sexual misconduct. It actually says in the Talmud, a man has a small organ. If he starves it, it's happy. If he constantly gives what it wants, it's never happy. And then this idea of killing and stealing is basically anti-God. So in the Jewish perspective, this is, all within, not just if it makes sense to us, but because God said. So when we don't take what doesn't belong to us, when we don't honor the source of sexuality that could create a whole new world that God made in the story of the creation, that each one has a seed to be fruitful and multiply. So you plant a tree and it gives seed, and then it could plant another tree. Even the idea that in the redemption